Hello, this is Mr. Mitchell with Southwest Junior High. I'm bringing you a video today for ninth grade physical science, AMI day 15. The purpose of this video is to provide you with some literacy support, to help explain the content, and provide you with some strategies that you can use to complete this problem. So to use my strategies, you're going to need to have a pencil and a paper handy. And remember, at any time, you can always pause this video, rewind it, skip over parts, whatever you need to do to be successful. So this is how this item appears on the district website. So this is the one that has the data table here about ethylene glycol concentration. So let's get into the problem here. It says two students predict the freezing point for 100% ethylene glycol. So if you recall back in physical science class, we were learning about phase changes and melting points and boiling points a little bit. So you may recall these three common phases of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. So that's what this problem is related to, specifically the freezing point. Also, if you remember back in class, we were also looking at some chemistry ideas on how we have formulas and names and how we use different models to represent different compounds and molecules. So here's just a couple of ways that ethylene glycol can be represented. So let's get back to our problem here. Andre predicts the freezing point will be less than that of 100% water. Jennifer predicts the freezing point will be about the same as 90% ethylene glycol in water. Both Andre and Jennifer made two inferences. Which inference seems most plausible? Choose one and defend your choice with evidence from the table. And it goes on to list four different more possibilities. And it also gives us this data table here to use for us to analyze and for us to determine which one of those inferences was actually correctly based on the data set provided. So I'm going to help you with a strategic approach for this challenge. I'm going to use skills that we've been working on in class all year and try to help you get through this. So you will need a pencil and a paper later as we move forward. So if you have those ready, it'll help you. So let's go through these 6 steps here that I have come up with for us. First one is to breathe. There's a lot of information going on here. We just need to relax, take some deep breaths, and believe that we can do this. So to get started here, now that I'm relaxed, I think I'm going to go ahead and graph this data table. I know for me that looking at graphs is easier for me to just look at data sets and tables. So what I did here is I entered this data table into a Google Sheet. A lot of you students will remember us doing this in class. So I entered it first. Then I highlighted all my data in those cells and I went to insert chart. And then it popped up a graph for me to look at. I went into the chart editor here and I customized some things, added some labels, and made it look better for this particular data set. So when I got finished, it looked like this. Then I went in and put some data points so I could see those better and put some more lines in for my X and Y values. And I came up with this graph right here. So I think this is a much easier way for us to look at this data set. Remember that we're focusing on the freezing point only. So you can ignore or disregard the data from the boiling point. So now that I've got a graph that I can look at, another way to visualize this data, I'm going to go ahead and record my observations. So now's when you'll need your pencil and paper. So go ahead and have that ready. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to hamburger fold a piece of paper. And on one side here, I'm going to go ahead and record my observations. And I'm going to give you some sentence frames here that you can use to help you write as we examine this graph here. So again, what they're going to ask us to do is to determine which inference seems most plausible. So which one is most based on the reality of the data set we have. Then we're going to have to choose one of those and defend our choice with evidence from the table. So let's go ahead now and write our own observations and get our own thoughts figured out before we start looking at those statements from the others. So if you notice here, I've set it up where you have some blanks where you can fill in either the words increased or decreased, or also put in a number value there. So let's look at this. First, as the percent weight of ethylene glycol blank, the freezing point blank. So look at that closely and look at that relationship and see what's happening. Look here at this axis. What's happening to this percentage here? And then what's happening to the freezing point? So look at these data points here and use that sentence there to describe what's happening first. Then I want you to look at it again here after you have that written. When the percentage weight of ethylene glycol reached this percentage, notice that a new trend begins to happen here. So go ahead and record your observation as to what happens beyond this point here. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do so that you can complete this portion here. So now that we've made our own observations, we're going to dig a little deeper here and analyze the data. So remember, we're using this graph here to look at that data table. All these points came from that original data set, so we can use this as well as the table for our analysis. So we're going to have all these different inferences we need to look at to determine which one seems the most plausible. Don't forget also, at the beginning of our problem, it gave us some more information about Andre and Jennifer. So what I've done here is I've collected the 4 from the problem, and I've added here at the bottom, E and F, inferences that were presented in the original text. So here's the definition of an inference. It's simply a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. So I'm going to assume here that Andre and Jennifer both looked at the data table before they created these written inferences. It says here in the original problem that both Andre and Jennifer made 2 inferences. But if I look at this, it appears to me that actually Andre might have made 3. So let's continue to analyze this data by evaluating each inference. Each one of these, we need to look at them and compare them to our graph to see which ones are the most plausible. Some of these may be completely incorrect if we compare them to the data table. So what I've done here on my paper, the same one that on one side I wrote my observations, On the other side here, I've created just a simple t-table that I can use to evaluate these inferences. So if you want to pause the video right now and set up your t-table before we move forward, that'd be very helpful for you to evaluate each of these. So again, what we're doing is we're going to evaluate each one, and we're going to determine, based on the data that's in the table or the graph, which one of these inferences that I could consider as true or false. So let's get started with the first one. So this is inference A. Andre, the freezing point continually increases as the percent concentration increases. The freezing point continually increases as the percent concentration increases. So mark on your T chart for A, write a T if you think this statement is true, and then write an F if you think this statement is false. The next one, B. This is Jennifer. The freezing point decreases continually as the percent concentration increases. The freezing point decreases continuously as the percent concentration increases. So evaluate this one for true or false on your t-table. C. Andre. If it is used as an antifreeze, one would infer that its freezing point is less than water. If it is used as an antifreeze, one would infer that its freezing point is less than water. There's a couple things to consider here. Antifreeze is a chemical that is put in the radiators of combustion engines to help keep the engine cool. A lot of times it's green or red in color. And when you have a leak, this is what makes all the steam come out from underneath the car hood. Another thing to remember also is that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. So go ahead and evaluate this one as either being true or false. The next one's D, neither. There's no accurate way to predict the freezing point of ethylene glycol based on the solution data. Again, neither. There's no accurate way to predict the freezing point of ethylene glycol based on the solution data. So now evaluate this one. Label it as either true or false. So here's E. This is one of those from the original paragraph. Andre predicts the freezing point will be less than that of 100% water. Andre predicts the freezing point will be less than that of 100% water. Go ahead and label this one true or false. This one is F. Again, this was from the original paragraph. Jennifer predicts the freezing point for 100% ethylene glycol will be about the same as 90% ethylene glycol in water. Jennifer predicts the freezing point for 100% ethylene glycol will be about the same as 90% ethylene glycol in water. Label this one as true or false. So we've done all this work. Now we're finally ready for step 6 of the strategy, which is actually writing the answer to the question we were asked in the beginning. Here we go. We're going to write our conclusion. So we want to use all the information we've gathered. We have a graph we can look at. We have this data table. We have these sentence frames that we can use. And we've also evaluated each of the inferences separately and labeled them as either true or false. So at this point, we just need to gather all our ideas together and present those in a written answer. So feel free to use these sentence frames if you would like. You're not required to use these, but these may help you get started with your writing. Be sure to email your teachers if you have any questions, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you with your work. Have a wonderful Friday and have a great weekend.